This is Alexa Linton, and you're listening to the Whole Horse Podcast. I'm coming to you from the Cowichan Valley on beautiful Vancouver Island in Canada, and I'm excited to be bringing amazing instructors from around the world to share their knowledge about all the ways that we can keep ourselves and our horses well and happy, and about some of the cutting-edge techniques, training, and different aspects that are coming into the horse industry and changing it from within. I'm so excited you're here, and I'm excited about the times that we live in and the shifts that are happening in the horse industry before our eyes. Let's get started. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Whole Horse Podcast. It's Alexa Linton here, and yeah, we're getting back into a rhythm here, everyone. And I hope you're enjoying these new episodes. And I sure am enjoying being back at this and engaging in these amazing conversations again. So today I'm going to be hanging out with one of my favorite guests. Shannon is here, and we're just gonna have a little chat. Welcome, Shannon.
Shannon of Humminghorse. Are you season 4 or 5 yet?
5 right now.
Yeah, because it was season 4 I was last there, and it was 4 was a really magic number then. So I'm gonna feel into
5.
What 5 feels like now. Mm-hmm. What's coming up for me, it's not a feeling first. I seem to recall that 5 is Shiva's number in Hindu cosmology. There was a time when I was very connected with that archetype of Shiva. And so what's 5? 5 feels solid to me. I remember we talked about 4 feeling like the 4 legs of a table. And yet 5 feels even more solid.
For you right now, I was excited to bring you back for a few reasons. One is that you're going to be a guest mentor for our Whole Horse Apprenticeship this year.
So exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And coming in the emotional module, which I just have a sense is going to be like, for the work that you're doing, a really perfect alignment in terms of, what you're really offering through this not new work you're doing, but this body of work that you're bringing more to the forefront in the horse world. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
I would love to, and I love that it's anchored in the emotional module. I was talking. So firstly, you'll let me know if that rooster sounds too loud. Does he sound a bit loud right now? I could probably shut this window.
It's kind of cute.
Prince, he's right outside the window. Side note, I have like chicken paddock paradise for anyone that knows about horse track systems. I've built a track system for my chickens. It's this very elaborate and kind of annoying setup because it blocks off big parts of the property. But I'm sitting at like kind of the far end of chicken paddock paradise. So they're not always here. They like journey here. And I always feel honored when they journey to this side. So that's the chickens. So as for the course, so this course, you're right. It's not a new offering. In fact, it's kind of the culmination of, I was working, my practice involves one-on-one assisting existing horse-human relationships. So people with their own horse, and helping to improve those relationships, improve movement, improve communication. And the course is kind of the culmination of what I heard myself repeating, what was common across what I would be saying in all my lessons. And of course, I don't say the same thing in every lesson, but what did I keep hearing myself say? What was common across them all? And so in some ways, it's kind of a foundations course, but it's not, it's also a course that I needed to get out of my system because I had a different course I was going to do. And I realized I can't do that course, which I haven't created yet, but it's there in the ether. It's called Mapping the Topography of No. So using a horse's no to as a starting point for relationship
Mhm.
instead of seeing it as the problem, right? But I realized before we could do that, we have to do this other thing, which I'm calling cleaning up the contact zone. So it's like, what is that, Shannon? What is the contact zone? Well, the contact zone is simply the meeting of two bodies. So my tagline for the course is energetic hygiene for horse and human bodies in relation. And if I were to rewrite that, I would say energetic hygiene for horse and human bodies in relation and in motion, because the motion and the movement part is a big one, because relationships are one thing, and then you add the dynamic dimension of movement. And if we all have this concept as horse people of like connection or contact, but I think that kind of has a sticky factor that doesn't always translate into the kind of mobility that we're looking for when we're in relation and in movement. And so to take that back a little further, why is it called cleaning up the contact zone? Well, what I was seeing when I'd go to different, properties and meet different horse-human relationships, regardless of what level they were at and regardless of what discipline they were working in, there is inevitably a kind of entanglement in their bodies. Like, and I'm talking very simply to give listeners an idea of what I'm talking about. Like, picture two dancers and they're stepping on each other's toes. But I don't want to just be, so another aspect of this course is starting to work less on physical bodies and more on energy bodies. So the kind of first thing I want to do to those two bodies when I see them is separate them. And that makes people kind of scared, because most people's conception of connection isn't one of separation. So it's like, why are you separating the bodies, Shannon? And it's like, well, the first reason I want to separate the bodies is because bodies don't start where the skin begins. They don't start where you start to feel the musculature. There's this idea in, coming from dressage background in a past life, in this life, this idea of like bending was always like this mechanical thing that you kind of carve out of a body. And it's like, that's not, if that's your locus of like where you're operating, where you're communicating, we've already gone too far into the other being. I want people working at the energetic level, right? So every body exceeds its visible boundaries, right? It emits an energy around it. So one of the concepts within the course is this idea of differentiation. So that's the separation that I'm talking about. But I anchor it in this relational idea that we would know from therapy, if anyone's gone to therapy, which hopefully we've all had a little taste of that, because it's good for all of us to be cleaning up our inner contact zones. There's this idea of codependency. And I know that's not a fun topic for a lot of people, especially when it comes to their animals. But, on the one end, the kind of space that I occupy in the horse world can be prone to criticize what we might call dominance frameworks, or, I always kind of picture the sport horse world, although dominance doesn't only live in the sport horse world, it lives in other realms as well. But it can be very easy to like use our attention to criticize that world and think that us over here on this other end of the spectrum, whatever we're going to call it, ethical horsemanship, heart-centered horsemanship, are like real clean and pure with what we're doing. But codependency is usually where that lives, like where we're coming from the heart and we want intense closeness with the beings that we love. But I'm seeing violations happen there as well, both at an emotional level, like a cognitive level, and a very physical level. So I know I'm up in the abstract right now, but I want to be clear that like what I teach in this course is very practical stuff. Like we're just taking two bodies and we're separating them. The first two So I have like 4 components, 4 chapters in the course. And the last chapter is the actual exercises and the lessons. And the first lesson is, can I be in your bubble? So I'm going to stop talking in a moment, and we can maybe just hang out in this concept of like, what is an energy bubble? What does it look like? What does it feel like? And how do you ask another being to be in their bubble? And I'll also just say that, so that is both like a physical thing that I want people to be aware of. It's an emotional thing I want people to be aware of. But it brings up this component about consent too. This idea of like, can I be in your bubble? Do I have permission to be here?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I'm just trying to change the location of that question to be one that doesn't start at the surface of skin or fur or coat, and it starts a little further out. So does that, am I making sense?
Oh yeah, I've been working with and teaching on the energy bubble for a long time.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think my first, I'm trying to remember where my first sort of sense of it was, but I do remember being quite affected. I think it was one of Linda Cohenoff's books, and she was speaking of maybe a gelding or a stallion that was with her that had an extremely large energy bubble. And anyone that sort of ventured inside of it would be met with, some interesting behavior, because he was like, I did not consent to this, attempt towards touch or, more closeness that I'm comfortable or feel safe with. And I just have this remembrance of, how she talked about, she would go and pet kind of the energy bubble. She would sort of like stroke the energy bubble until the point where, she was able to engage with him, with consent at the level of the skin, the body, and
right.
Yeah. So
yeah, it's a beautiful thing. So operating at their energy bubble, and what I realize in working with different horses in this way and trying to teach different people this is like sometimes you can't get a read on their energy bubble. And so I was thinking about this today. I mean, I think about it a lot, but I was thinking about it today in particular about like, what do you do when you can't, what's going on there? Because not everyone has the same level of sensitivity and feel or patience to read into it. For people that don't have a really strong sense of the felt sense, I use visual cues. And I usually start at the visual cues, because most people aren't in that level of sensitivity. When I come across someone who is, I'm like, yay, like we're gonna move really fast through this stuff, because you're going to be able to feel it. But beyond being able to feel it, you can read certain cues. And for people that haven't played with this yet, what I would be saying is like, it is an ongoing thing. It's not something you do once and it's like, oh yeah, that's where the bubble is. My horse's bubble is this size. It's a lot of waiting, because horses that have been really accustomed to having other beings in their energy body, it's almost like they've retreated into themselves. And there's this new term I'm playing with that I don't know what it wants to be, whether it's going to become like a book or whether it's going to become another course or it's going to become a component of this course. But it's very much in my felt sense with horses. And the word is surfacing. And I'm even having like, it's still just an idea. I mean, it comes from my felt sense, but it's birthing itself into the like mental realm. And I'm trying to help it be a mental thing that I can articulate to people. But it's like, what is surfacing? Surfacing is like, I think body workers would really understand this, even though they might use a different kind of language. And I think about the horses who have kind of like retreated into themselves and you don't have a clear read of their energy bubble. And what you're probably going to feel, so some of the felt sense qualities of that kind of horse to me are, it's inert. right? There's not a vibrancy there. And you can even go to the skin and get very little touch, very little sensation off the touch. In my course, I talk a little bit the rock scale, like, because some horses are so into a shutdown mode.
Yeah.
That, like, part of what my course at certain points will be doing is trying to help just move them up the rock scale. And I've dealt with horses that are like,
oh yeah,
rock, rock hard, inert. So felt sense qualities, rockness, inertness, hardness, density, lack of, there's no reciprocity at the level of feel. And so this would be like for the people that are like, my horse won't move. So, and I have a whole exercise section in the course about what if your horse won't move. And I mean, God, I could spend a whole life talking about that. And I've condensed it into this one lesson within this course. But again, just to get people to feel into a little bit of what I'm talking about here, it's like, okay, so they won't move their feet, let's say. That's cool. That's not my starting point for movement, because there's internal movement. Again, this is, I think, where the body workers, I'm maybe talking your language here, where it's like, okay, if movement's not coming out of the feet, I can't get the horse to move. Is there any movement? Like, is there any reciprocity between your body and theirs? Like, do you see a reaction or feel a reaction to your presence, to your body being in their zone, to your hand coming towards them, to a fingertip? Do you get a flicker on the skin? Do you get a little twitch? Or is there nothingness? And if there's nothingness, then it's like that could be a failure on the part of the human. I don't mean a failure, but like our perception isn't just refined enough, and we need to hang out there longer until the feelings reveal themselves. Or is there really nothing there and the horse is like really retreated into themselves? So what I'm ultimately looking for, and whether there is a big reactive energy bubble or whether we've got a rock that we're dealing with, in either case, what the course is trying to get people to go looking for is any kind of feedback loop between your body and theirs. And that consent isn't something that happens once and I'm in the energy bubble, we're good to go, we're golden. Or they said yes to me getting on their back, now I'm in. It's like consent is a moment by moment conversation between bodies. And I do love that consent is becoming it's becoming more part of the vocabulary of horse people. And I love that. But I'll sometimes hear people say something like, I asked my horse for X and they said no. And so I let them be. And I mean, that's cool. Like, I'm not here to tell you how to work out your relationship. And my invitation would be like a no, just like a yes isn't a forever yes. A no isn't a forever no. And if we just like accept the no, and that's the end of the conversation, we're missing out on like some of my most playful stuff with horses comes from them saying no. And it becomes this kind of like this coy little dance we play where they say no. And it's like, I've got to figure out the key to how to get them to say yes. And of course, there's a danger in doing that you'll wear them down into a yes. And that's not what I'm talking about, is where I'm going looking for that reciprocity. And how do I know? Well, if they say no and they walk away, I don't go chase after them. I hang back. I wait to see, did they look over their shoulder? Did they walk away 5 steps, look over their shoulder, see that I'm not coming, and then they come back to me? Like, then we start the conversation all over again. So it's a very playful thing. So yeah, does that feel like, when you've been working with energy bubbles, is this like a language that's familiar to you, or some of these scenarios?
It's so cool too to strike the parallel with the body work and the manual therapy. because of course it's hands-on for the most part. And I always ask permission prior to working. And then that idea of like the, not taking no at like, this is the end, this is like the wall coming down. Because what often I find is that it's sometimes about how you phrase the question.
Yes.
Sometimes it's, well, I don't want to do that thing today, but I'd love to do this.
Yes.
Right.
Changing the question. Yeah.
Exactly. Like I have all these things on offer. Is there something in there that sort of strikes your fancy or feels good for you? Right.
Yes.
And it's one of the reasons I love having sort of like a little apothecary of modalities that I can pick and choose from and offer up, because one horse might be so stoked about massage or acupressure or trigger point work, and another is like, no, I just really want energy work and I want to be connected to on a spiritual level, and I want to flower essences and all of that sort of stuff. And I saw that at one point, Raven, I had asked my friend Brienne to come out and do a session with her. And I just kept getting this feeling like she needs a session, but she doesn't want to be touched. And Brienne's main body of work is like manual therapy. And so I was like, well, I'll just like see where she's at on the day. So, went to get her, and she was kind of like, okay. Like it wasn't this full bodied yes. And then when Brienne kind of got all her gear out to do the manual therapy, Raven was like, no, that's a no. Like, and I was like, I just have this sense that she's just not there. And so she literally didn't even lay a finger on Raven that day. And Raven, I think horses know what our repertoire is. They have a sense of like, okay, so this person can offer up this, and this. And Brienne, in her back pocket, she had been trained at the same school as me with a bunch of energy medicine and applied kinesiology, which she doesn't always pull out because it's not the thing that's wanted the most. But Raven was like, yes, we need to do that. We need to do all this weird energy work stuff. That was what she needed and wanted that day. And I love that. I mean, I remember, I'm going to tell this very short story because it was kind of funny. Diva was at a barn, and she'd moved up not that there's a herd order, but she was sort of feeling like she was in charge of the safety of the crew. And there was dogs that came into the paddock, played really rough, like roughhouse in the paddock. She did not like it. And she would often go after them and be like, get out of my paddock.
Yeah.
I'm in charge of the safety, and this is not okay. So we had gotten our notice to move because of this behavior. And then I happened to hold one last applied kinesiology course at the property. So as we're going through, we're testing, and I'm like, this is really weird. There's something really strange coming up. Anyways, Diva had somehow figured out, like in the energetic realm, that one of the women there was a dog trainer. And she's like, Cheryl, like it was really coming through clear. I need you to tell them why my behavior is totally normal and appropriate for this situation. I mean, it didn't change anything as far as like having to find a new barn, but it was like sort of Diva going, this is important to me. And I know that I'm not in the wrong here, even though it's not desired behavior.
Was she getting victim blamed?
Yes, she was.
She was
not
getting victim blamed.
She was not having it.
She was just trying to defend her.
So I just remember that. Oh, it's so interesting. So with the bubble, I love this. I would often teach exercises of hands up, move forward until you feel heat tingling sensation in your hands. And it was always so amazing to see people, like, as the light bulb went on and they're going, whoa, I feel it.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I add this extra piece around, like, if people are hearing this and they haven't worked with bubble work, and they go and they like attempt to feel into the energy bubble and ask the question of like, can I be in your bubble? Some of you, like, don't be surprised if you don't feel it. And that could be partly because you just still working on feeling into or observing that level of sensitivity, in which case just try it, just keep trying it. And the other reason might be because the horse is withdrawn into themselves. And it's like, if you really get into this work, it can become a kind of soul retrieval for the horse.
Totally.
To recognize I'm not feeling an energy bubble here. And I need to be modifying how I'm relating to this creature, because just because they can go through the motions of your ride, your walk, trot, canter, your whatever you do with your horse, doesn't mean they're actually there. And of course, like, underlying a lot of my work is a trauma-informed approach. And I kind of avoided putting trauma jargon into the course. And if I were to do it again, I might pepper that more. I've done more trauma language in my handouts. So a lot of my videos in the course have like PDFs and stuff that are handouts that explain that. And in my Zoom group calls that go with this course, we talk a lot about the trauma stuff. But I bring trauma into this part because it's like, trauma gets installed in the body through a number of mechanisms. And I think, part of the reckoning of all of us embodied beings on the earth right now, humans included, and perhaps humans especially, we need to recognize there are installations of trauma in almost all of us. And we might say, like, where do those even come from? And without getting too esoteric, we can just really simply say, modern times. Modern times have caused an alienation between us and our bodies. And it's traumatic. We're like not in our bodies. And the same is true of the horses, and perhaps worse so in many cases. And so looking for like the primary yes, which the flip side of it is starting with no's. Like, if all you're seeing is no's, also perfectly valid. Great. If all you're seeing is no's and you're not seeing yeses, we can breadcrumb our way back. We can reverse engineer through the no's to go find the yes, because often the no's, underneath all those no's, I often use this reference of like the princess and the pea, that fairy tale with all the mattresses, and underneath the mattresses, she can still feel that pea. Underneath all those no's is the primal or primary yes that was never agreed to. And we got to like work our way down all those mattresses to that little pea to say, where was either like where was the first no? Where was the first yes that never got given? And that's my favorite kind of work to do. And so, like, if we can get to riding, grand. But often these days, with the kind of work I'm doing, we're not even getting to the riding, because we're working on not skipping the steps of where are the yeses, where are the nos. Now, the good news is like, it's not a linear process. Like, once you go back, you reverse engineer all the nos, you get the yes, you get a few yeses in a row. The horses can sometimes fast track you through, and you don't have to one by one ask yes, no for each behavior that you want. Got a yes, got a no, got a yes. No, like, they can fast track you, but you really need to go back to the first yes. And the first yes is, can I be in relationship with you? Can I be in your bubble with you? And lo and behold, when you start clearing some of those out, it does enter the realm of body work, because some of these things that are manifesting as like lamenesses or other kind of pathologies, that might not be their primary, those can be symptoms of this other thing, of where they're having to hold their body in such tension because they're dealing with this other being that is in such a denial of their felt experience. Even those of us that are the caring ones, that are on that side of the spectrum, that are saying, oh, I love you, horse, I want to do right by you. But if those people are accustomed to a kind of relational dynamic that is quite at home in codependency, or what its more modern term is enmeshment. And I prefer that term, not just because it's the less judgmental version. Codependency is, it's got a yuckiness around it, but I like the physical picture that is drawn by that word enmeshed, like you're entangled. So like, how can you even go looking for the yes if you're already so entangled in each other's fields? There has to be a bit of an extraction process first. And the flip side of getting a yes for the horse's bubble is the human even occupying their energy bubble?
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually the harder piece. I think a lot of us on the ethical, I put that word is always in big quotation marks when I say like the ethical, whatever we want to call it, this softer side of horsemanship, might be inclined to think that love will heal all. And like we could then debate like, well, what is love? And I'm here to deliver the bad news that just having like a heart-centered intention to do right by our animal isn't enough. I know that's not a popular statement to say. And it's like, well, why is it not enough? Well, if you yourself haven't like looked at your own wounds and have a sense of how you're occupying your own body, sometimes what we think is love is kind of a neediness, and it's a kind of hunger that wants this thing from the other being. And if we're not examining the way that we bring this thing we call love to the world, there's got to be a little more maturity on that. And without us getting into psychobabble, that's why I like to keep it at the energetic level of like, do you have an energy bubble you occupy? Because the horse is going to go looking for your bubble. And when you don't have one, they already understand this energetics. You feel profoundly kind of unstable to them when you don't have a sense of your own just being in your body first. But then, can I move this body through the world in a way that I kind of like, I'm okay with owning my own space? And the moment I hear myself say that, and I already think about how certain people might receive that, it often will already be getting misconstrued as dominance. Like if I say, occupy your own body, fill up space, and move that space through the world in relation with the other bodies you come in contact with, I can already sense, I know this because I've gotten feedback, and there's still a part of me that doesn't have this wound fully healed, where that already starts to sound like dominance language. And I'm here to say, I know it might sound like that, and there might already be a like reluctance to fill up space, to take up space. That's what dominators do. And I'm here to say, like, that's part of the wound that we ourselves need to look at, because our models of power are toxic models of power. And the like ethical response or the healed response to toxic power that takes up too much space isn't to take up less space, because then we're kind of like these like amorphous beings with no core and no sense of ourselves, and we're always kind of in reaction to the outside world instead of can I be in myself? Can I be in relation with other beings, maybe even other wounded beings, where me meeting them in their woundedness doesn't have to be making myself small to make them feel big, right? Or to help them in their wounded journey. That's not how we help them. We have to first be willing to occupy ourselves. And so in this like process of trying to like kind of, for some of the horses, there does need to be like a soul retrieval. It's like, can you come back out into your body? But the other side of that is, to the human, are you in yours? And are you comfortable with your own power? Because horses want to be big. When you bring them out, they can become dragons. And if the moment you bring them out, like let's say we stick with this idea of a soul retrieval, and that dragon comes out and says, oh man, I'm back on the scene, and I'm a bit of like, I don't fully know, like, thank you for releasing that power, but I don't know where my edges are anymore. They're going to go looking for edges. And if they go looking, I shouldn't say edges, but they're going to look for contours, as they would find in their herd, the many energetic contours of the collective that will help them know themselves through reverberation, through energetic reverberation. If you don't feel that energetic reverberation, how do you come to know yourself? You could become a tyrant. Or worse yet, like I think some of our horses are holding themselves back because they know we can't handle it. Right? Like, it's not always a case of soul retrieval because they've been beat down and their soul has had to withdraw. I think some of them are kind of like very energetically intelligent and are trying to be careful with their bigness. I think of my guy, Ivan, my big draft, Ivan. I think he tries to be careful with his bigness. Mm-hmm. I don't know where all that comes from because I've not tried to send that message to him. Maybe the environment itself says that to him. You're big and these environments are a bit like small. Maybe the other horses say it. Maybe some part of me does say it. Mm-hmm. But I get the sense that he has to sometimes feels like he has to make himself small. And I need to be sure that if I'm going to go do the work of so-called soul retrieval, that when this bigness comes out, am I ready to meet it? Or am I going to go, oh my God? And then that poor being has to be like, oh no, I'm not supposed to be this big. You know, like I don't know if you've ever had the experience. I mean, you and I haven't spent a ton of time together, but I know you have so many offerings for the world. There's a bigness about you, mm-hmm. although you're also very gentle and soft. I don't know if you've ever had to move through this world kind of making yourself a little smaller for concern of, am I going to be too much? Or, I mean, I don't want to make this too personal for you, but I can ask the question more generally to anyone listening or to yourself if you want to answer that. Like this feeling of either having to make yourself small for fear of being too much for others, or being a bit small because everyone else is a bit too big. And can we find a place, or could we dream of a place of being with other bodies where we can just be what we need to be and trust that they'll, through their contours, tell us, okay, in this moment, that's a bit much. I'm not mad. You're not in trouble, but that's a bit much for me right here. And we go, oh, okay, this is where I sit in this particular relationship. For example, right now, I feel like I've been talking for too long, so I'm going to pull back. I'm going to pull back that bigness. So I make sure I'm not being too big, but it's this reciprocity between bodies, and ultimately getting to a place where hopefully both beings can have a level of personal responsibility within themselves, but knowing that even finding that between two bodies of like, you're good in your energy, I'm good in my energy, and we have a conversation at the edges instead of this enmeshment of like we're inside each other, or the dominance, there's no room for you, it's all about me. Does that make sense? Am I too in the abstract?
No,
with
not
this?
at all. I think, I just seeing this in the energetics, and one of the things I've realized over the years, for I think all of us, maybe animals, humans, is like you said, I love that idea of the reverberations, like the contours of the community. It's that idea that we require this interaction of energy bubbles to know ourselves and to know what works for us or not. And not only that, I think for many horses, they're searching for that. They're searching for, whether it's a steadiness or an anchor or a sense, just a sense of something that they can hang their hat on for a time. I work with a lot of horses. I mean, across the board, horses are dealing with emotional trauma, and that can come from, I work with a lot of horses where it's right from the beginning. Weaning right there is like a huge soul break for a lot of horses.
Weaning,
at the weaning.
Yeah.
And for some horses, that's like what I would consider a stopping point in their world. You'll notice these horses sometimes that are like, they behave like a 6-month-old, and it's literally their progression as a soul, because they were not held and given sort of something to work with. And that's something as humans, I think we can offer our horses something of such value, because we have the capacity to recognize, like, okay, this horse needs something to push against here, to be with here, so they can actually move beyond that pause point, that space where they lost themselves. They can gather themselves back up and find a motivation for coming forward into this present moment. And that's something I see a lot with horses that I work with, is these particular formative, pivotal moments that leave this deep and lasting impression on these animals. And we don't always think about it, because maybe they've only been with us for a year, and so we've only experienced that 12 months with them and the things that have happened during that 12 months. And then there's all this mystery with horses, especially. You'll never find out what happened to them unless you employ an animal communicator and go down that road. But it's very, very unlikely that the person that is selling you this horse, or before that, is going to divulge information that might devalue this animal in your eyes. And so it's challenging that way, because oftentimes you will never know what occurred. But by being that strength, I don't know what the word is, and maybe you have it, Shannon.
Well,
you know what
the
I'm
word
saying?
that's coming up here is I don't know if you're aware of this kind of like conversation in the like thinking person's or conscious person's ether about elderhood.
Yes.
About elders and being an elder, and that being old doesn't automatically make you an elder. And in fact, elders are very rare things these days.
Very
and it's like
rare.
What is even an elder? One definition I've heard is that you've, through your life process, come to transmute grief into wisdom. And I think that's one beautiful way of discussing elderhood. But how do we name that in like a more animal realm or an energetic realm? And like elderhood for me, because I see this with the horses too.
Oh yeah.
They're in perpetual states of infancy, right? And it's kind of built into their domestication process, being in our domestic human worlds. It's the primary. Well, I mean, we could go intergenerational with where does the primary wound live at the like moment of domestication, but at least in this life, it's I think it's at the weaning moment, or in utero with the mare's trauma. But what I try to do partly in this course, and why I'm even using words like personal responsibility and talking about separate bubbles and talking about the importance of the human being occupied in themselves and being careful to resist this urge that can happen on our soft end of horsemanship to see the horse as the regulating force, some kind of like savior spirit figure that is going to tell you how to human, because we are so stuck in our own phase of perpetual infancy and we don't have elder models. I want to be really careful about that. Not to say that there are no domesticated horses that are self-actualized being, and I'm using that kind of synonymous with elder. I will come back to that word elder in a moment. Or the word we could use in trauma terms is like self-regulating, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I've got a bunch of things on the table here, but it's like the first thing is saying like on this soft end horsemanship, and I see this in parenting too, where it's like this idea that like children are like, they're so magical. Who am I to tell them what the boundaries are? Like, let the child be free. And I love that impulse. I really love this beautiful impulse to challenge our existing hierarchies. I love where it's coming from. But no grounded elder is going to put the child in the position of leadership. My goodness, let them be children. Protect those beings. They were not born already regulated to live in this very chaotic, nonsensical modern world. It is our job, like trauma. I know people are hearing it everywhere now, and just get used to it, because it seems to be that this generation, this time on earth, we're the ones that are being asked to meet this trauma. And in the language of like elder talk or even ancestral talk, there's this idea that if we heal our trauma, time moves both ways. That generationally, if we heal our trauma, we heal it for our ancestors too, and we heal it going forward. And I'm saying this for the horses too. They didn't ask to be in captivity with us. So the onus is on us, the human, to be the leader. And I know like right away, it's like, aren't you talking dominance talk with leadership talk, Shannon? Aren't you talking dominance talk with saying show up in space? And I'm saying, let's get into the, like, open to the nuance of what I'm saying. I'm not asking you to just reverb back to like, oh yeah, the be the leader talk was right. We need to go back to that. No, I'll replace it with a trauma word, with this which is regulation. Can you be in your body in the presence of your horse? Can you be in your body when they're saying no? Can you be in your body when you're met with the dissatisfaction of a horse that won't move, and like the level of dysfunction that feels like? Why aren't they moving? Did I do something wrong? I thought they were supposed to do this. What about this? What about that? You're already out of your body. Can you just be in your body while that's happening? Bigger still, what if the horse is freaking out? What if they're getting really big? Can you be in your body? Because this is the other side of like this, bringing nuance to this idea of consent and understanding it through the lens of regulation. When a horse, so let's say we're on this like soft side of horsemanship and we're saying everything goes, just like with the kids, everything goes. Who am I to tell them no? Let them all be these blossoming flowers of what they want to be. Again, I love the impulse, but that can become a really dysregulated worldview, that these kids nor these horses should have to be the ones. Who's regulating? What nervous systems are they modeling on for regulation? In my course, I use the metaphor of you are the flagpole, they are the flag. But eventually, I want them to be another flagpole. And I don't mean that, don't take the metaphor too far and it be like we're rigid. I just mean we're steady. And when they are flapping, we don't go flapping with them. Because like when my mare Fauna, who's my big expressive one, when I invite her to be her most beingness self, I want to see what's in Fauna. I want to help that soul that might have retreated come out. What comes out isn't automatically this autonomous, agential, sovereign, all-knowing being. What first comes out, bless them, is a strong energy. And I'm so happy that strong energy comes out. But that strong energy is often dysregulated. And in that moment, what is the being that's flying around at like 100 miles an hour, almost like, and my nervous system is going, is she going to like kill herself? Like, I got to step in here. What am I stepping in on in that moment? Am I stepping in to tell her no? What I'm stepping in to tell no to in that moment, what's going on is dysregulation. And what's going on is actually like fear and adrenaline.
Yeah.
I've learned to read in her a point where she is expressing herself and where that expression becomes its own trigger because she's almost like flooded with her own freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And she's never been taught within the bounds of multi-generational, back to this word elder, multi-generational social collective that has had a chance to, through the generations, root into the ground, into the environment, into each other, and be this like webbed network that within which she can find her contours. She doesn't have that.
Mm-hmm.
So if the human doesn't go start figuring out their own contours, careful that we don't just use this word consent. Oh, she wants to be wild. Like, at a certain point, what you're seeing as her or them in that moment, whether it's the child we're talking about or this being that we're inviting to come out, it's actually a fear program or a dysregulation program, a flight program, if we're talking about fear, flight, freeze. And we have to know when to, as responsible, embodied, regulated handlers, when to intercept and say no, not necessarily to the horse, but to their fear. So like one of the phrases I've been playing with lately is in asking the students that are willing to engage with me in this subtle act of occupying space but not being dominant, is to like, I'm not asking you to say no to them, but I'm not asking you to be bigger than the horse. I'm asking you to be bigger than their fear. I'm asking you to be bigger than their pain. I'm asking you to be bigger than their dysregulation. And what does bigger mean? It doesn't mean you get big and scary and push them down, because then we'd just be causing that soul to retreat again. I'm saying that an elder, if we're going to try and attempt a definition, is a being that can face, that has, and I guess we are back to grief again, like that has faced the scary realms and doesn't themselves retreat, that has gone and walked in the realm of pain, in the realm of sickness, in the realm of flight behavior, fear behavior, and doesn't just say no and then withdraw themselves, which that's what I've encountered from almost my entire social experience, human on human, is one, I'm a big soul. And when my big soul comes out, sometimes probably with its fears and demons and toxicities, I'm met by other beings that don't know what to do with it. And I've searched my whole life to find someone that says, I see this, I see your bigness and its sharp edges. And you don't scare me, but I'm also not going to let you walk all over me. And what a relief for me to go, oh, thank God I didn't know what to do with some of these energies either. And thank God you're saying no to some of these energies, but you're not saying no to me. You're not walking away from me. I've never found that in my life. So I've had to go on this path of finding it myself. And by no means is it a finished process, but it's pretty good with regard to the horses. Like I'm pretty good at doing this with the horses. And now my task is to bring it back to the human world, where I'm not nearly as equipped as I am with the horses. But that's kind of like my long and drawn out. And I'm so happy you brought up the weaning.
Oh, it's tragic.
Because this is all part of the same conversation.
Yeah.
Because we're going looking for the bubble and that soul that might have retreated into themselves, that retreat might have happened a long time ago.
Yeah, big time. I see it so much. And it's something that we sometimes just, I don't know, we forget about it, but it's just a sense of like, oh, it was so long ago. I've got this 15-year-old horse that was almost 15 years ago that happened, right? Why is that? And we do that to ourselves. I think we kind of gaslight ourselves that way. Well, that was so long ago. That was when I was a baby. That shouldn't be affecting me anymore. It's like, oh, think again.
It's all about the inner child work.
Completely, right? And so I think it's just potent to work from that space. And I love, the piece around going back, tracking back to that first kind of no that was almost a yes, but wasn't. Where is that place? Like, not that maybe we'll ever live in a world where weaning is consensual. I mean, what a wonderful world that would be. And I've seen ways where horses aren't needing to be forcefully ripped from each other, and these babies aren't needing to go into a full escalation, collapse state in their nervous system and all these things. And I hope that this is a place that we're moving towards in our world, that there's more ethical and humane solutions that are provided, so that these horses don't need they don't need to go through this heartbreak. It's not necessary. Yeah.
And it will, that journey into their primal wound and into our own felt sense to feel into these energy bodies. Like, for me, this is the territory I walk. I know no other way but to go into the core. We have this now, I realize, this common friend, Allison, who is also going to be doing, she's a mentor in the Whole Horse podcast apprenticeship. Through her astrology reading, she's helped me realize some aspects of, she's helped me put a name to some aspects of my own personality. And they are, I'm probably going to get it all wrong, but it's in, like, I'm a Virgo, but she says there's like a bunch of Scorpio in there and some Aries. And you were saying, are you Aries?
Oh, yeah.
Did you say that here? Or have I heard you say that elsewhere?
I don't know, but
okay. So there's Aries in mine as well. And there's some stuff with Pluto. And she was saying, like, these are, in my memory of what she's saying, these are all like kind of like, they're both the combative would be like the negative word, but like go to the core, like cuts to the core, and also fearless, like on the Scorpio side or even the Pluto side, like fearless in walking in the dark realms. So for me, this is territory that is very easy for me. I know no other way, but what I'm recognizing is it's not so easy for the humans that I'm asked to go into their bodies to help serve the horses. And as the humans go into their bodies to help serve the horses, I think what they'll find is probably some inner child stuff.
Yeah.
And so this is work of, yes, it's both showing up in these energy bodies, having a core, like finding your own core and not being afraid to show up in your power, but also knowing that there is extremely soft work happening here. One of the things I teach in the course, I'll wrap this up because I'm sure we're coming close to the end, but like, one of the things I teach, and it's kind of central to the course beyond this idea of differentiation and energy bubbles and consent, is once we're in our territory of like, I'm me, you're you, I'm my body, you're your body, then we can start to read the signs of stress and tension a little better. Because sometimes what we're reading is us. What we're reading is not their tension, it's us in their body. So we have to first remove us so that we can get a better read on what is their attention. And I teach this, what I call a cycle of completion, where we move them through their stress response so that tension moves out of their body. And without getting into the details of that, I'll tell you that what comes out on the other side, I was really surprised when I started seeing this the first time, and now I see it in so many horses. Coming out the other side, I get them suckling. And at first I was kind of like, whoa, like, is this a fawn response? Is this like, the vaunted submission that mainstream dressage has wanted us to have? Are they getting small on me out of fear? But I have all my checkpoints to see like, what is this behavior coming from? Have I put them in a situation where they had to feel small? And I read all the other circumstances and it's not. it's like when we've come through this beautiful, like they feel safe. I've moved them through something deep in their bodies and they feel safe with me. And I get this suckling. And it's quite beautiful and quite sad, because what I think I'm seeing and what I've named it as before is the inner child work of the horse. And I think we are, what I am witnessing is possibly one of the primal wounds, one of the primal or primary processes that never got to see its completion.
Yeah, didn't complete.
And I see it a lot in my mare Fauna, but I've seen it in client horses as well. I call it baby girling or baby boying. And they go into this deep bliss state. And I've noticed sometimes it can find a compulsive loop, at which point I have to just be aware that, like, is this, I mean, at that point, I think we have to give it up to a spiritual reading and not just try and scientificize it, because this is deep stuff. And so I let them. And if it gets too far into like a compulsive loop where I can feel like they're never gonna, they could stay there all day suckling on me, I give it its space, and then I gently kind of extract and know that each time we go through that, we might be going through some mini version of allowing that wound that never even got to be looked at in them from those early extraction processes, from the one solid bond that they had in this captive domestic setting. So thank you. Like, I didn't think that's where we were going to go with this. And like, that was such an important piece you brought to it, because I do see it, that primal and primary wound. So that's like additional. I haven't talked to many people about this. I just give it its name. Yeah, they're baby boying, they're baby girling. It's a thing they do when you reach a deep connection. But I, for us offline, I'd love to talk about that more. And even for anyone else that has witnessed this phenomena, because I do think it is kind of somewhat uncharted territory in the observation of domestic horses and their various woundings.
Wow. Yeah, that would be that. I feel like we've opened up a can of worms, and I'm very glad for it. I think it's unnecessary traveling right now if we're really walking our talk when it comes to supporting the well-being of horses. So yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that. Oh, well, we have to come to the end, which is very sad. So Shannon, can you tell everybody how to connect with you, connect with your course?
Yeah. So I'm humminghorse.com. I'm also Humminghorse_equestrian on Instagram. And my course is called Cleaning Up the Contact Zone. It has its own address somewhere in the internet ether, but you can find it through either of those channels, Cleaning Up the Contact Zone. I have ongoing kind of entry into that course. Our group Zooms are coming to an end this week for a little while until we get a few more new enrolls, and then we'll start it up again. But that's where you can find me and more about this talk. And that's where you can share your talk about equine inner child stuff, if you'd like to share.
No kidding. Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Shannon. This has been a real pleasure.
Thank you, Alexa. I'm so happy to see you back on the scene.
It's good to be here. Good to be here. And I'm stoked that you're joining for Whole Horse Apprenticeship. And so we'll be seeing Shannon in December. And I hope you have a great day out there. Hope you learned something just like me. Thank you, everybody, for listening in. Thanks, Shannon, again.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.